Stanja Belusco, W1GV, Whiskey 1 Good Vibrations at your service, with a little Zepp dream. I've gone over this, or alluded to this idea before, but here is what I would like to do, or what I'm planning now to do, if I manage to get out to the Stargazer Ranch in Meeteetse, Wyoming, next winter, possibly for the 160-meter contest. There's my truck, big number 8, and there's a mag mount glued down with a ballon screwed down on top of it, and I'll show you more detail about that in a minute. 100 feet of RG8U coax with molded connectors on either side. I can park that big number 8 a good ways away from the Stargazer bunkhouse, where I would be staying with my Palstar antenna tuner FT857D radio powered by a marine battery, and a little bench or keyer paddle there, and little speaker and stuff like that. Well, the idea here basically is this is a Zepp antenna, a half a wavelength of wire with a kite or balloon or a Kytoon supporting it at the far end, and then a quarter of a wavelength of window line, electrically a quarter of a wavelength, goes to the ballon and then to this coaxial cable, and the tuner there can get rid of any SWR imperfections that are bound to exist. The problem here with an antenna like this is you don't know exactly what your feed point impedance is going to be with a Zepp like this. It might be 2,000 ohms right there at the feed point. It might be 4,000 ohms. It might even be 5,000 or 6,000 ohms. In the very worst case scenario, if this were about, say 6,000 ohms, and you had your window line here that was 6,000 ohms here, 300 ohm window line, then you're probably going to get on the order of a 15 ohm pure resistance at this ballon. Now 15 ohms is going to present something around a little over a 3-to-1 SWR on this 100 feet of RG8U coax. But at 160 meters, that isn't even going to produce anywhere near 1 dB worth of SWR loss. The only problem it might cause is that the radio might not like it, and that's what the tuner is there for. I doubt that you'll see an SWR higher than 3-to-1 here with these proper dimensions. Half a wavelength there is somewhere around 256 feet. Quarter of a wavelength here, probably on the order of 110 feet or so. Depends on the velocity factor of this line, but I would figure that out and cut it to the dimensions for the center of the band. Now, that's the center of the band, the part of the band that I would use, the CW part most likely. Well, unless you have a perfect half wavelength here, you will get some radiation from this line. And unless you have an exact quarter of a wavelength of line here, you will get reactance at the feed point, and that is something you do not want. The imperfections in this length, which may cause a little bit of radiation from that line, aren't really going to matter much because this line is right up there on a line with the antenna, and it's not in the shack. The beauty of this scheme is that it doesn't really need any more of a ground than big number 8 would provide. I could possibly ground it to something, put some radials down or something just for a little insurance. Lay them right on the ground out there, or right on the mud, rather, at the Stargazer Ranch in Meeteetse, Wyoming. So that's the overall scheme. A little bit of a close-up of that ballon arrangement. This is a Comet mag mount with a SO239 type connector on the top of it that I have glued down and C-clamped down to the lip of Big Number 8's truck bed. And then you take your ballon, and they make these ballons that are like a can that have these little connections on the top that are kind of like screw eyes. You connect your wires to those for your parallel wire window line. And then this has an SO239 on the bottom of it. So you take a double male connector right here. A double male connector. And just put it on there and screw that thing right down. This ballon will stand right up like that. Of course, it may not support the full force of the kite pulling on this line, so you'd need in one of the windows a few feet up to tie a piece of nylon cord here and tether it down to one of those hooks in the truck bed that the Big Number 8 happens to come with. So the only thing now is that the wind at the Stargazer Ranch. Look this up, by the way, Stargazer Bunkhouse. The only hits that you get should be the place that I would be staying. And I did stay last winter and had a ball, had a blast on 14, 18, 21, 24, and 28 megahertz. Had a blast. Good conditions for winter last year. It was really cool. But this is the dream. There's the overall antenna scheme again. The winds are fickle at the Stargazer Bunkhouse, Stargazer Ranch, Meeteetse, Wyoming. You may get no wind at all when they're predicting a 50-mile-an-hour gale, or vice versa. You may get a 50-mile-an-hour gale when you go to bed at night. There's no wind at all. You wake up at midnight and the whole place is shaking with the gale. That's the problem here, and that's why probably do best if you could find a Kytoon to support this thing. But first things first, gotta save enough money to actually go do this next winter before I can take it any further than that. Stan Gibalisco, W1GV. I did. Here we go. Whiskey 1, good vibrations, saying 73. And so long for now.